Right. Excuse me. Okay, okay. Oh, okay.
Invitation, please. I don't need to say that. I'm not good. Got it? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention, please? Hey, Jackie. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to Black Beauty, the exhibition and panel discussion this evening. And I would like to take this opportunity to invite the member of Parliament for St. Peter. Mr. Jordan, did you say a few words to start us off, please?
Good evening to everybody. Panelists, yes, welcome to St. Peter, welcome to Spikestown. It is really good to have you with us. And it is also very good that we could come together to share in what I believe is a very important discussion. We would have viewed the art and the discussion though on Black beauty, I think is one that all people need to be aware of, need to be a part of. And I say that because I'm of the view that our concept of beauty as a people has been so, I don't know if I want to say, I'll use a word as strong as distorted, but maybe distorted is the best word. And it is my view, that has been so distorted that we carry a lot of baggage as a result of the distortion, as a result of what we've been told, as a result of what has become sometimes almost reflex. And I think I've lived longer than I have ahead of me. I'm pretty sure that I don't have been long lived with my family. But I remember my primary school days. And this is something that stuck with me. Where we are sitting, I used to be part of that. We were sitting in the class 2, class 3, and class 4. And we are drawing people. And after I left primary school, it occurred to me that the people we drew, particularly the females that we drew, did not look like us. I remember the stick people. You draw a circle in the head, you draw us down, you draw the 2 feet and the 2 arms. But then when we got to the ear, it always came over the top and came around like that, a little curl at the end. And over the years, I've wondered how those of us who were 8, 9, 10, 11, having not been as far as I remember being indoctrinated, the teacher didn't say, well, this is how you draw. I don't remember, maybe it happened, but I don't recall that. And it has said to me that there is something that over 300 years of a certain framework being placed around us has impacted us. And I believe that this discussion, among some of the other activities under the umbrella of the Spikestown Global Freedom Festival, will help us. I think it's going to take us at least a step forward in understanding who we are and being better able to appreciate who we are. We're never going to be able to move forward properly, effectively, until we come to grips with who we are. Because we are trying to move ourselves forward. And if we're not sure who we are, or if we're not comfortable with who we are, it's going to impact how we move forward. That is as natural as taking a step. If you're not sure if the flooring board ahead of you is going to get to take your weight, then you're very tentative in stepping forward. That is natural. And if you're not comfortable where we are and who we are, about who we are, then we're going to be very tentative moving forward. And that tentative approach is almost by definition a retardant to moving forward effectively and being able to give what lays ahead of us our all. Despite some Global Freedom Festival has the conceptualization comes from two places. We started in 2020 with the gathering, and out of that we had the presentation by Sir Hilary on the lecture from coffee to owing, and then we launched the book, his book about coffee. We did that in 2021, and out of that the Center for Hybrid Studies saw an opportunity to create, to use the concept of coffee's struggle for freedom, he and his fellow revolutionaries, that struggle for freedom, to conceptualize a festival that would have as its goal discussions on freedom. This discussion this evening speaks directly to freedom, because to move forward, we need to be unshackled about who we are so that we can give the future our all. And I look forward to this evening's discussion. I look forward, and I've said this to Dr. Murray, Carmelia, and all the others on the planning committee, Jackie, that I'm looking forward not just to this discussion, but I'm also on the concept of Black beauty, the idea of Black beauty. I'm looking forward to next year's discussion as well, because I believe it is a discussion that has to continue. We're not going to be able to change the world, change Barbados with one discussion, but we have to start the discussion. There's been discussions before, but we have in this festival to start the discussion, and we need to continue it so that the message, and all of us involved, and as others get involved, we can start to understand ourselves a bit better and therefore position ourselves to be able to take advantage of the future and actually craft a future that is our future and not a future that is handed to us by somebody or scripted for us by somebody. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, panelists, for accepting the invitation to be here and to participate. I look forward to a meaningful discussion, and I hope that we're all I almost was at church. I was going to say strengthen and edify, but I'm not about that. I hope that coming from this, we are enlightened and empowered to understand ourselves and to move forward and to share what we learn with others. Thank you very much.
So this evening, our host guest will be Dr. Roxanne Burke, philosopher. Her areas of research are wide and varied, but they include health, bioethics, love, sex, and she will be the one to lead the conversation around this topic. So welcome to Black Beauty. The Center for Hybrid Studies, and I hand over to Roxanne.
Thank you, Dr. Murray, Derek. Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for being here. So this is the second panel discussion in the Smithstone Global Freedom Festival. The first one, which was held about 3 weeks ago, was looking on information technology and freedom. And our second session is, as you heard, the theme is Black Beauty. And we're very pleased to have here 3 excellent panelists. So, the mic is, thank you very much. So I'm going to introduce them, starting from the far left for me. So first, Joe Coffey, who is a published researcher and lecturer in psychology. And she's worked in Barbados at all levels and across UWE in lecturing and coordinating educational programs in psychology. She's a former head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, Nita Barrow Unit, and she served as chair or coordinator of several national and regional institutions focused on women's empowerment. Her current research interests are in the psychological impact of gender issues on educational achievement and participation, students' learning styles, co-education and gender and psychology, sexuality, and HIV/AIDS. So welcome, Joan. Our second panelist, Andrew Millington, is the head of the Department of Creative and Performing Arts in the newest faculty at the UWI campus, and he's senior lecturer in motion picture arts. He has lived and worked in the United States for over 30 years before heading back to Barbados. He worked as professor of film at Howard University, and he's made feature-length films, including Zora's Dream, short films, and the documentary The Caribbean in Shakespeare. He's interested in films of the Caribbean and the African diaspora, cultural identity, nationalism and film, slavery and film, historical memory, and forgetting. Welcome, Andrew. And we also have Dr. Nancy Ferguson, who has for more than 48 years worked as a graduate teacher and specialist lecturer in Caribbean history, culture, and African art history. She has done research on the intangible heritage and origins of the Barbados landship. She spent 7 years in Grenada as a senior lecturer for the T.A. Marichaud Community College and as chair of their Department of Humanities, Arts, and Culture. Welcome, Nancy. So we have an excellent panel who will be discussing a range of issues. But just before getting into that, I want to pick up on something that Minister Jordan said, because without realizing it, maybe, Minister Jordan, you were doing a little bit of philosophy in what you were saying. The Jamaican philosopher Lewis Gordon says that one of the biggest questions that people can, that we have to ask ourselves when doing philosophy, and certainly for Caribbean people and people of African descent, we have to ask, who are we and what do we want to be? And so when you spoke about having a recognition of where we are and how we're going to make that next step, you're asking yourself, okay, that significant philosophical question, what is it that we are right now and who do we want to become? And that ties in very much with how we see ourselves and how we see the space around us. And ties in, of course, with the theme that we're talking about, beauty. So the first question that I want to ask all three of you is, what is your conception of beauty? And then we will launch into a further discussion after your response. So, Joe? Okay.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. I'm not sure how I got here, but I welcome the opportunity. And I always think of beauty in terms of how we feel about ourselves. Yes, how comfortable are we in this skin that we are presented with, and how we move forward with this sense of who we are and an appreciation and a comfort around that identity of who we are. And this is something, and I guess I'm drawing on my psychological background, that we come into that understanding of beauty through our interactions with the people who have brought us here, primarily our parents, and all the people within our spaces who provide us with a sense of value about who we are and help us to understand that primarily, that understanding of beauty and who we are must be located within us. Yeah, so I speak about beauty and thinking about that inner beauty, where I talk about personality and some of those attributes and intellect, etc. But also recognizing that there is an outer component to that understanding of beauty. Yes, and as I say that, it's not just about the self, because we live in a space with others, and therefore that whole notion of a standard being set for us will also influence how we see ourselves as beautiful. Yes, I just stop there.
Yes, excellent, sir. Thank you. Andrew?
Beauty is beauty. Beauty is not philosophizing, because for me, beauty started out as an identification of something that brings pleasure. On one hand, and that pleasure also has a creative element to it, creative expression. That means that we are engaging with other humans, we are engaging with objects in space. But beauty emerges from a certain satisfaction with the engagement, both from you and from these objects. And I think will give you a sense of that. It took me a long time to come to this, to be honest with you. Beyond the surface feeling of I know what joy is, I know when I look at the work of art, how I feel, what it makes me, what it conjures up within me, whether or not the adrenaline is unleashed or whatnot. But what is key is when the spirit, the mind, and the body find a synthesis that just says, I'm human, I am of the world, I am identified that this activity has given me a register of existence in the world, right? So I'm a contemporary of this system. And I'm just using an example now, all right? When we were in undergrad English, we studied African American literature, we studied Caribbean literature, we studied African literature. and we studied European literature. And for some reason, European literature tended to be the standard. That is a peculiar expression that is given to you. But yet, in exploring all these others, and there's another interesting complexity that comes there. There's a difference in the language that emerges in all these different literatures that we're reading. In other words, what became human was not the ability to address one way of seeing or one way of engaging, one way of acknowledging beauty. But there were different ways of doing it. And what emerges out of that is you begin to see the tensions, especially in Black life or people of African descent in the diaspora. That is this tension of all these different forms emerging. And then you realize all the other forms have peculiar ways of expressing the world and us engaging with the world and us appreciating. And it is not only a concept of beauty that is wonderful, right? Because when I began to study film, a lot of that really said that beauty was death. A really dangerous concept, I know, but if you see the struggle of African people in the world, the tension that I'm talking about, yeah. Sorry.
People not understand.
Good. I'm sorry, Minister. This is how freedom emerges now, right? When you start talking aesthetics, this is what happens. Various cultural forms begin to emerge that suggests that my statement and my expression of being human is, yes, universal, but yet at the same time, it is peculiar. Now, even within Africa, and because I'm part of the creative arts now, two things have happened. One, I have to think about dance, I have to think about music, even though my area is film, right? Or theater. And it becomes interesting because in our time, getting back here again, what was interesting was I was one of two men in a class of about 10 women. So that communal process now was not just about a human, all right? But was also having to acknowledge that even the humanity had a different expression, that beauty had a different expression. And what I'm saying is that I had to be conscious of the women expressing their perception of beauty and being nurtured by it. Because up to that time, there's a male way of being in the world that said to me, beauty was this, all right? But the engagement now with women, and that's what I talk about. I say man to man, but this is a communal engagement that happens, all right? And the forms that emerge. So I became a filmmaker and acknowledging the images that we saw. And the one thing that struck me is the dominance, the ideology again that's coming in, this tension again, all right? Because when you started, for example, I went into a class and we had studied character already in that background, right? And this idea of now having to move from the beauty of language to the beauty of physical representation and begin to study the dominance of a Hollywood industry, all right? For who the white male, which is within the Greek sort of conception of beauty, and you can go back to those sculptures and study them or whatnot. That when Aristotle writes poetics, that is the image that is projected upon the world. All right. When the evolution then of these contexts within which these films start to reproduce what is called the plantation landscape means that somewhere along the line, they insert Black people, but they insert Black people as subservient, or they create images which for them are beautiful, but for which we contend and still are fighting. All right, so Toms, Coons, you can give them names, mulattoes, mammies, but all of them have certain definitions and are reproduced even today. You could go into that. It is those filmmakers that excite me, and the filmmakers that are attempting to turn that. Right? So there's a film called The Spook Sapling, who gives you the impression that he's following this way, supporting the construction of this European world, and then suddenly you realize when it's too late that he is the one that has the ability to deconstruct it. So I'm saying the beauty that emerges then is an analysis of the world, an analysis of the tensions that we deal with. I won't go any further, but the forms that emerge. Right? In fact, I'll say one thing because I set this up. The dance. All right, so the ballet, form, line, what have you. All right, go to Africa, and if you go East Africa, if you go Ethiopia, and you see how they express themselves, the focus is on the shoulders. And the movement is a very spiritual movement. It's a connection. Now, Ethiopia was never colonized by Europeans. What I mean by that is that even though the Italians did, attack them, there's no other place in the African planet where Europeans were able to stay and dominate the political and audience systems, right? Right? You come to Central and other parts of Africa, and the movements, the key movements are up here. All right. Now remember, the European is still to move further, which we inherited West Africa. You can tell me what that is, right? Below the base. You can talk about the tension. All right. When you go crop over, you see a group of people who are expressing, this part of themselves. And if you ever decided you would go up to St. Philip, to the park, the Christians, right? Not as I'm making a judgment, right? But I'm saying those are the tensions that we're dealing with, that we can only do that on the street for 2-3 days. And then you go to South Africa, and what are you dealing with? The feet, right? Which really now is an expression, the form, the manipulation of form, the manipulation of the human in time and space. When you come to the Caribbean, you realize that essentially, even now, we are beginning to see a global expression and take the memory of what we have to try and shape a future in which we see beauty. I'll talk another time about the beauty of Bridgetown and the design of Bridgetown and what is happening. But for me, those are the issues around beauty. And I'm sorry that I did the wrong way, but I come out of a jazz tradition, so you have to respect my improvisation.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Nancy.
Yes, good evening to everyone, and thank you for having me. Understanding beauty. Everybody has when you say the word beauty, everybody has a different way of expressing it. And of course, it must come from our experiences. My experience was first in dance. And I did African dance. The very first African dancers, instructors that we had was from URYR, and I was a part of that. And it was beautiful. It was really beautiful to see people dancing and moving in rhythm. But that's one way of looking at it. That's a physical beauty. It's an aesthetic art. But even when the minister was speaking about who we are, I went back to my very first class when I teach, because I still teach cultural studies. And the first thing I did is, who am I? When I start to teach, understanding what makes up you, your hair. Do you know why you have the hair you have? Those are some of the things you will be asking, and the students might say, no, ma'am. Why do we have? So when you start to explain to them about Africa and the sun and all those different things, ooh. So you mean we shouldn't really straighten our hair? I said, well, that's up to you. That's for you know to decide. And then you come down to, so why we have these broad noses? And you give them an understanding about that. That is also beauty. You have to understand that you have to breathe out faster, that you're not keeping in the cold air. You don't have the cold air like that, what they have in Europe. But in Africa, it's going to be humid air. So you're not letting that out. So you understand why you have your nostrils like that. And then your mouth, the food you eat, what things you pull in when you are chewing and eating, all of these things make it possible for you to understand now why your lips are the way they are. And then the language we will then speak, that is necessary to come out. While Europeans, if they are making, we say, what would they say? They say, so you have an understanding. So when you start to understand why you have been made the way you have been made, you then start to appreciate, or at least say, because I understand now why I have been made this way. And all of this makes beauty. We can say beauty in the form of physical form, but you know, there were some canons of beauty that were followed when I went to art school. We had to follow those canons. But then I realized that there were others that maybe some of us would not have appreciated, would not have known when we look at Africa. We don't like to see skinny women. We would say skinny women. When you are covered, you're well covered. My sister there above. We understand that men look and say, not only that it is a voluptuous look, but it is a look of wealth. So understanding the canons, and then of course we have people from Southern Africa that were really endowed with good hips. And we like them to see when they dance and move their feet, you're seeing what is most prominent. And we say, wow, you can only admire big women. I remember the first time we had a group here from Africa. Well, not the very first group, but one of the groups that came around 1974. Yes, 74. With Babatunde Olatunji. And there was a lady who came with him. She's probably no long dead. The name was Akwasi Baotigbi. And she was a big woman as a dancer. I'd never seen such a big woman dance. But she was beautiful, she was graceful, so it had nothing to do that, there wasn't anything that she couldn't do that the smaller persons could do. So why do we kind of distinguish? We learned then we are all of a family and we all do the same things the same way. But an individual still will realize that you do something still slightly different, but we keep in a rhythm, following a particular rhythm. I wouldn't dare to go into Dr. Mellington's area. That is his area, film. But I'm sure that in speaking about dance, theater, and all the different things that you have to take into consideration as to, I'm still trying to answer your question on what is beauty. And we said Black beauty. That was not really considered even 1700s. Because my dissertation actually looked at the images of Black people between 1700 to 1834. And in that, I was looking at how they portrayed Blackness against whiteness. So it was a little conflict. There was a conflict. And even you looked at paintings, then you might have looked at prints or cartoons. There was something there that you could still always focus on and enjoy. And you say that it was a good film, or it was a good portrait or whatever. These things are part of what we know have had to accept as the canons of beauty for us. We can't use now the canons of beauty for what was being white, because I looked. Europeans, theirs was a pale, even in the paintings, they were pale. While for the Africans, they were people of color, many different colors. But still, there was the figure. They were full-busted women and with good hips and probably small waists, small ankles. Those are some of the things that they might look at as the canons of beauty for Africa. But as things change, we will see how our younger folk accept these canons and how they decide to paint and draw. What are they working with? When you look at some of the work now, can you tell if these young artists have been working with any particular canons? Have they got to that stage as yet? Or are they still searching for self? So at this point, I think I will Turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Some beautiful responses to the question. And coming out of the three responses, there were references to the beauty as it relates to the human body. But there were also references to the creation of art and what is beautiful art. And for the persons who came in late, I hope that you'll be able afterwards to take a look at some of those paintings that are on the walls or displayed throughout the room, showing aspects of Black beauty. And then there were the references to dance, and then Andrew's references to filmmaking. But coming out of the responses, I wanted to ask, first of all, I have several questions coming up to the responses. I wanted to ask, first of all, about what you said, Joe, in terms of the question of or beauty not just being physical, what we see. Within Igbo philosophy, and it's certainly present in other aspects of African philosophical thought. There's the idea that beauty is not just about the physical body, but the inner self as well. So if one is not a good person, if one is not a good character, then it means that even if you're beautiful on the outside, based on societal standards, you are not going to be deemed to be beautiful because you're of bad character. But what we see now very often, and you can tell me if you think I'm right about this, is that there is so much of a focus on the outer aspect and a reversal to the extent that there is the conception, the perception that if one is beautiful on the outside, then one is therefore of good character. So I wanted to hear your thoughts and the thoughts of you as well, Nancy and Andrew, about that tension that exists between how we think about beauty and morality and the relationship between the two in relation to the body.
So as I look at the psychological literature, there is a notion that what is beautiful is good. Yes, and we've all experienced aspects of that, or we have witnessed how beautiful, according to a particular standard, attractive people basically get away with certain kinds of behaviors because of that old notion, that assumption that what is beautiful is good. Yes, we have seen it played out within our local space as well as globally. Yeah, but there is also, as you speak about that reversal, and that is emphasis on that outer beauty. The issue is there are benefits if that outer beauty and portraying a particular standard of beauty that's set by some arbitrary system, we recognize that there is a benefit. People are profiting off of certain standards of beauty, and a number of our younger people and older people as well, as we try to understand and identify and express our own beauty, we are caught up with trying to find where we fit in. Yes, because we want to enjoy the privileges and the benefits of presenting ourselves in a particular way. But sometimes we are not given enough opportunity to find out what our standards are and to set those standards for ourselves. Yes, and therefore it is important for us from very young to help our young people understand and articulate and provide them with the messages that say to them, because as Andrew said, because you exist, you're beautiful, you're important. There is pleasure from being around you. And that your standard, your expression of beauty is valid. It is worthy. Yes? Because we cannot ignore the fact that we have that certain standards or expressions of beauty are ranked and valued highly. And when we begin to think about our whole own notions of beauty and Black beauty in particular, the way we express ourselves in terms of the body, in terms of your hair, your dress, you are sometimes discriminated against for certain kinds of expressions. Your understanding and your expression of beauty can sometimes be devalued, and therefore people go inward. They don't think about themselves in enhancing ways because they're not really displaying a standard that somebody wants. And therefore, for us in the Caribbean, we need to understand how those self-definitions are being created. What are the messages that we are sending within the home, within the society, within our churches about who we are and how beautiful we are? Yes? So when people who are attractive do immoral things and they are celebrated because they've gotten away from it, we are sending certain messages, particularly to young people, that there is no need to do that work, and strengthen that beauty within us, and therefore let it be consistent with the portrayal that you are presenting.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Andrew, Nancy, I don't know if you want to add.
I'm picking up on what she's saying because it's a serious problem. The alienation of the self. That is, I don't know if we were talking about it. You see the creation of metaverse, right? And for some people, they're going to be happier in the metaverse than dealing with reality, right? Because the reality of day-to-day life for some people has become very difficult. The left conceives capitalist economies as not being favorable to men, especially privilege, right? And therefore, once you can't see yourself finding a sense of identity with what you're doing, search to find it somewhere else. And so you want to create a game of this other world, which comes with a certain commoditization, right? So that bodies then become products for sale. Entertainment right? Becomes, the physical becomes more important than statement of the actual self, right? And there's something in there about losing one's soul, so to speak, right? And we are becoming more and more accepting of it as the legitimate means of life. You know, it's hard to articulate, but we are more trying to live up to the image which we see in media. That we are trying to rationalize what's going on in our day-to-day lives. So in a sense, you're right. And for me, that's why when I said beauty is that, that's what I'm getting at, because that's the expression of that's getting to, it's empty, but yeah, people are gonna pay for it. You know?
Okay, all right, thank you. So it's interesting that you just said, Andrew, that there is that it's as if we're not thinking enough about the self, but of course we have to recognize that the physical body and the way in which we are treated in terms of the types of bodies that we have does shape the self that we become, right? So what Nancy was saying earlier, it connects to that very much in terms of those physical bodies that we have and how others treat us does make a significant difference in terms of how we then perceive ourselves and that sense of self, that sense of identity that we develop for ourselves. And if we are utilizing particular standards of beauty that tell us that we are ugly, that we don't meet those particular standards that are set, then it means that the way that we're going to be thinking about ourselves is going to be very problematic. Yes. Now, in responding, you all also to the first question that I asked about what is beauty, you also spoke about the idea of some universal standards, but of course, we know that very often those universal standards, so-called universal standards, approximate the European standards. But in talking about social media a while ago, Andrew, we recognize that there has been a bit of a shift, hasn't there? So if we think about what Black bodies are like, we are seeing where there's something of a shift in terms of the lips, the hips, the bottoms, where people are going through surgery to get the approximation of Black bodies because of the sense that what is beautiful now has some components of what is typically or a Black person's major features, while at the same time those standards are connected with white bodies. So I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about that tension that exists as well in terms of the universal standards that are white, but that are also being connected in a way to some of the aspects of Black beauty that we would normally think about.
All right. So we're talking about white supremacy. We're talking about construction of race, which is a social construct. Because there's obvious this rationale with respect to how it operates. So what does this mean? And it is interesting because really power relations are set up to maintain a certain dynamic for which people in the European set really control. Not just what takes place, globally, but in terms of how we then reinterpret that and see self and see other. What is to be desired is still this one idea. And which is why I call it tensions, because at a certain level, it can't exist. You're always going to have resistance, and that's why we talk about liberation of the colonized self. It is to say, yes, we have been colonized by British, for all these years. And then suddenly you gain independence. Those are statutes, that's the Constitution and whatnot. But the problem is that the psychological devastation is so great that we're starting now to heal from those wounds. And I mean, you can't get away from that. I'm talking about, the black skin, white mass, right? And so, and the more we try to move away from it, the more we have to face it. It becomes a literary terms, a tragedy, they say. But if you see the tensions that are emerging, if you see the assertion of self, it means that somewhere along the line, there is a dynamic which is surging, pushing back. But how does it do that? It goes back, and it redefines the self within the communal space. I think Caribbean is in that sort of vortex, right? Both in terms of how we see ourselves and recognizing that we have to recreate our own image in order to exist and to operate in this global framework. And then the example says it best. It says image stretch. In other words, we are proclaiming a self for which we have delved into and we have recognized that there is a certain power of being and expression which has survived. If we only reach within, it will empower us.
I sit sometimes and I get very impatient because we have been recreating these images and these representations, and I'm saying within the Caribbean space, why don't we construct our own identities? Yes? Why don't we come up with, not come up, but define clearly our own standards of beauty? Because, okay, we came into the world and we had an understanding that we were precious and beautiful. When did we begin to think that something is problematic about who we are, about our notions of beauty, when are we going to begin to create and define those standards? Are we waiting until somebody tell us that we are no longer third world? Is it that kind of thinking that we are going to continue with? Yeah, when do we begin so that we can really make a contribution, minister, to this thing called national development? How do we define that development? What are the images that we want to see? What are the areas of production that we value? We look at all this beauty around here, and our young artists still have to go somewhere else to make a living, you know, to sustain themselves. So we have to stop paying lip service. We need to move these discussions into action. I'm sorry if I'm pushing it too quickly. You know, because when I look around and I see the beauty and the talent, yes, why, and the new knowledge being created, and we're not utilizing that information, those understandings to shape our development in the way that we want. So when do we begin those discussions about that definition of the development, of having a space where we can live and be happy and feel pleasure? And I know we can't move forward if you don't have an understanding of the past. But we need to really do things simultaneously. Sorry for my impatience. But you know, we really need to get serious about how we see ourselves, how we define ourselves, and the value that we give to who we are. So when Andrew speaks about that tradition of dance, and when we use our hips, that we don't devalue it in a particular way because we're not standing on our toes, we have to check ourselves. Yes? So it's about changing the psyche, not only of the individual, but of the community, the society. Yes. You know, and that individual work is important, but it must be translated outward so that we continue understanding and moving that thinking throughout. Yes.
That connects to what Andrew was saying earlier in terms of art as a social artifact. And I think within our Caribbean space, we have created quite a lot of art that we are proud of. But I think part of your concern, Joan, would be how do we then take that more seriously? So we've created indigenous dance forms and musical forms within our space. The landscape is an indigenous form. How have we utilized those? Have we utilized them well enough as tools? And some of what we would have learned from the development of those forms in terms of transitioning to other aspects of national development. And that is a key question that I want us to talk about. But before that, Well, first of all, we didn't officially acknowledge the people who have joined us on Zoom. So thank you very much to the people who have joined us on Zoom. And if you have any questions, please type it in the chat. And I'm going to ask if there's anybody in the audience who has a question or a comment at this point, before we continue the conversation. And, or if you're not ready to ask a question or to make a comment, but you want to do so, just indicate to me somehow so that there is a question, Eric?
No, it's just housekeeping.
Yes.
Can you check if your mic is on? Okay, so it's on now. And but your voice is so powerful, yes. And when the audience, when you ask questions, because you don't have mics, speak loud enough so that the people on Zoom can hear. Speak loud enough. This is the mic for the Zoom room. So just project so that everyone can hear.
Okay, so any questions right now? Joy?
I have to get up there.
Speak loudly. Well, yes, get it so the people on Zoom can see who's speaking.
This is a topic that touches my heart, and I just wanted to intervene here before it moves to another area. There's so many things I would say, but I want to focus on something that Joan and the overarching thing about privileging, rewards, sanctions, and so on. I'm in the classroom. We've been making tools for women, mostly women, for over 40 years now. And the tension and change, I have seen it over the years. Example, early in my career, I would get women telling me, Joy, do something behind my behind. No, I'm getting Joy, emphasize my behind. So that is a change in attention, and this is what I think Nancy is saying, and things say we fight back, but the tension is still there. Because where is it accepted and where is it not accepted is the issue. Secondly, I want to go back to my training. I didn't do well at fashion school, and I could never understand. I used to sew beautifully, I had good designs, clothing design. And it's only after I left college, I saw a student of mine, and she was saying, John, you don't want to do something that really well. I insisted in putting my women in the afro. But I couldn't get the afro wrong well. And the next thing that I realized afterwards, the teacher didn't know how to do it herself. So she could not instruct me how to do it. So my women never looked what the aesthetics of it. So I've seen, I don't know how they teach now in terms of the I don't know how they teach now. But I would like to think that what is minister will be fit back. So these are things, but I will keep back to now because of the some of things that are coming up and the version of the team. And to answer your question, Joe, I was listening to Stefan Walker. He was giving a lecture at the Methodist Church celebrating this. And something that he said stuck with me in terms of going forward. And he said that in terms of music, he's a music person. I know he did all the things about music and everything. But he said one of the challenges that we face now, all young people are here physically, but their world is the internet. And you see, when you're creating that world, it's not of their environment, but it's of that world. So join at the tensions and yeah, so that's basically for the discussion at this time.
I'd actually love if somebody would comment on that last point from Joy in terms of the role of social media and the internet in terms of how young people are interacting and creating art.
Well,
I can only deal with my students. And my students this term, because we just finished, were also fashion students. And when I did a critique of the course at the end, they were all telling me, Mom, we had a good time, but we would love it to be face to face. It's not like first face to face. So I say, so what about it, do you think? Say, well, you know, sometimes you can see people's expressions, facial expressions and so forth. If we had you there, that we would be able to see sometimes when you were very serious about something. We know you're strict, that's one of the things they also, we know you were strict, but there are things that I know that you relax with us and so forth. But we try to still keep that kind of decorum, you know, in class. So their whole thing is they enjoy being online for certain things, but they prefer to be face to face. Some of the questions that they would ask me, they would ask me in the class. They will wait until when the class is finished and say, Ma'am, can I talk to you after the class? Say, okay. So they'll wait until the last. Or not, they'll call me on WhatsApp. We have a group chat that I have with all the girls, because they're all ladies this time. So they will then come and ask certain types of questions. But going also from that now, I wanted to make mention, Andrew was talking about some of the areas that we don't really deal with. One of the things that came to me to talk about is women, white women, coming to Barbados and they are enjoying the sun. So they like the idea of getting the skin darker. And then we have white blonde-haired women that trying to wear locks. So what is this really saying, that the African, the natural way of the African way is the accepted way even by some way, because you know it's a very difficult thing to say the word we. It's a very difficult word. We. I don't know what you're thinking and you don't know what I'm thinking, but we say we. Sometimes it just cannot work. We see gentlemen, and now there's this, I would not say miscegenation, but the intermixing. Everybody say, this beautiful white man and black woman and vice versa and so forth, and then the children. But a lot of those children come up really hard because they don't know where exactly they fit. And it's hard for them to cope, especially at school. A lot of the young people that have been coming up. You can tell it even when they start to draw. Same kind of things, you know, we all started with these stick figures and so forth. But then who do they really change? Our students have changed from the stick figures, and guess what they've changed to? Japanese figures. So you better believe it. And I still cannot understand why. How they got there? Is it from the there's a particular yes, Japanese type things that they are doing now. A lot of the films. So have we just been influenced, or we say, when a person has decided, oh, I like that style, and they want to use it for their work, it's just like any of the artists want to use that style for their work. Is it their style, or is it something that they have not yet delved into to understand why they are using that? What is it that is saying? Is anybody who can help me?
Oh,
Yes, somebody at the back.
Hi, I just want to say one thing, because hopefully I'm speaking loud enough for everybody to hear. As you can see, Roxanne's already laughing. She knows who I am. Right, I just want to ask a question before I say anything. What is it exactly about anime or manga that you don't really connect with? I understand a lot of people that maybe in the older generations tend to think that it's really weird that someone my age or younger might be into that, even though we are not Japanese.
Don't get me wrong. I have had, how many years I've been at community college teaching now? 1996. Right. So from 1996 onward,
Yeah.
I've been at community college. They have done it and they're continuing to do it, but I am just asking if they understand why they like something.
Well, like always is an individual choice for human beings. So perhaps some people may be easily influenced. Other people simply choose it because it is an original and entertaining art form.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. For reasons because of, like many of you have said tonight, that you've had centuries of European influence. And that has crafted many ideas about art and what is art and what is acceptable as art. Japanese people, while being a little bit more fortunate than others, as in getting their things put out there into the world, have not always been so lucky. And while it may seem that anime and manga and all sorts of those things that young people are into are very widely accepted today, that was a hard fight over decades of time. And even in the society today, the governments don't always look upon it very fondly. So the reason that you're seeing it more prevalently now, especially in the Western world, is because a lot of artists from around the world have put in a lot of work, a lot of effort, blood, sweat, and tears to make it something that isn't simply just Japanese, but something that the world and all people of all generations can appreciate as an art form, to be taken seriously, and for the artists to be recognized in their own way as being valid to the art community.
So that is a standard of beauty.
Yes, beauty comes in many forms, and that hopefully for people like me and my generation and other people who are into that, hopefully we are getting it to the basic standard or mainstream standard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jeremy.
You're welcome.
So I want to use this as a segue to actually ask you a question, Andrew, about your own filmmaking and about the filmmaking, Black filmmaking generally, in terms of its representations of Black beauty, because Jap anime, well, Andrew, you might know Jap anime, but there are some issues with Jap anime in terms of its representation of Black people. So while and even its representation of Japanese people. So while it moves away from the standard Western style of representation, there's still questions about how it represents even itself, but certainly how it represents Black people. Incidentally, the last session the first session that we had, one of the panelists then, Russell Watson, who's a photographer, he spoke about the history of photography, and he mentioned that it's that film for Black, that was optimized for Black faces and Black skin, developed because of a chocolate company and a wood company
they realized that their products were not being photographed as clearly as, lighter color wood. The darker wood was not being shown as clearly. And so we as Black people benefited from that because of the need to sell certain products. So Andrew, yes, do you think that we have, that the technology is there to accurately and adequately represent Black beauty? And are there enough artists who are working in the genre accurately and adequately representing Black beauty?
Good question. Let me just make a statement about Magda and Adam. Within the context of what we're discussing and what you just brought up. And that is the same stereotypes I was talking about earlier, and reproduced in those forms. But there's what seems original is also the fact that it is coming from a different culture that has a currency. And we have to accept that as art and as culture evolve, we're going to be attracted to the new. So to get into the point, even the same Russell will tell you, we'll talk about work of art in the age of mechanical. Forget what it is. The fact that these machines, camera, when we go back to analog, before digital, for some people in this room, analog is not a word in the dictionary, it's a word in the dictionary that doesn't have it. When they developed the film strip, all right, and Eastman Kodak is really the company that mastered it, right? And Japan had its own too, but it had Fuji. I forget the other one. All right. Polaroid. All right. Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that when they did the tests for those same films, which is really what Russell is talking about, when they decided that human figures were going to take precedence in, the distribution of this thing called film, characters and whatnot. The films were, what's the word, set up in such a way that once they were exposed, the standard was for landscape. All right. So, and if you don't believe me, go. even today it happens, right? You go and look at all the old films, the black and white films, and you see a Black person. The standard photography is that you have details so that you can make out features of the face and whatnot. Black people is a blob. Why? Because technology itself was not made to make us, the center. Right? So what happens is, all right, you get, I was going to use a famous line of all the gin joints in the world. She walked up to my name will come back.
Casablanca.
Casablanca, thank you. From Frank here, from Buddy here. If you look at that film, right? From the structure of the film, the story itself, right? The guy who creates the pleasure of the film, the piano player, right? Kiss is just a kiss. No. All right? It's something about him, All right? And if you go and you look at that film, when he is in the frame with the white folks, he is a blob. Because you are exposing to give prominence, again, as I said, to the white figure and the white figure story. The Black guy and, she comes in and he gets angry and whatnot, and he's playing to their situation. It's a tragic sense of it, right? So now, why that happens really is the power of who creates these movies, who pays for these movies, right? So the winter talks about the human, and a lot of people didn't accept where she was coming from, all right? And one of my theories is when she started to talk about Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, right? That created a problem because suddenly you were using this emerging art to, which even a lot of Black people were comfortable with at the time, to determine, what it is, how we become accepted. So the Black filmmaker now, who has come to prominence, right? I'm not saying that his work is perfect, all right? Suddenly determines, all right, we're going to turn this thing around now, and we're going to start with an aesthetic. First of all, is the community. This is the hottest day of the summer, all right? And we have to contend with violence, all right, which for a lot of Black people, daily, they have to deal with. But we have to conceive life, living within the community and struggle into this. And create faces which are exposed differently, all right? And Ernest Dickerson, who was his cinematographer at the time, talked about this. The fact that we had to think about the image and exposing the image differently, right? So that if you had a white person and a Black person, we didn't just expose for the white person, we put it in between. So a different aesthetic, a more human aesthetic emerged, which is what Rachel was trying to say. But Rachel is not a filmmaker, so she doesn't use that language, right? She says from the story, the shift, the gaze shifted. We started to look then at Black people next to white people, and there's an equity that's taking place in that. Now, and then coming all the way down now, there's a guy who went to school with me called Bradford Young. And what was interesting with Brad is that Brad is one of the first Black cinematographers to shoot Star Wars. So what happened, right? When I think the film is called The Arrivals, right? Brad says, the way they portrayed the world, the story was exhausting. Right? And the only way that you could begin to retell that story, that Black kid from them, the story, which meant we had to change the aesthetic. Listen to what he's saying now. And he's saying the world became mundane because this story began to take on a different, to reinvent, to reverse what we are accustomed to, this white hero. Suddenly, we're changing it now. It's not even the conception of a hero. It's the conception of suddenly the Black guy is human, which we didn't have before. What you have in all the other movies, and I could show you a million Westerns and whatnot when the Black people begin to emerge. Crooks, thieves, why you have, all right? Not to say that human characters don't have flaws, but we talk about privilege. White people have good, bad. Black people have bad, all right? Then now get to see art in films. And we don't see that for that. where it's just a black world. All right, and there are some filmmakers out there who say, well, you know what? This Hollywood telling stories, it's three act structure that came all the way from Greece, and then started. Is that because that's not how our culture is telling stories. Our images now have to begin to reflect some of what I'm seeing on this wall here. All right, some of those strong, robust colors and the aesthetic is beginning to change. Right? Not enough of it is happening, but you know what? It's going to happen. Why? Because they know where the bottom line is. All right, and whatever is going to make money and be attractive, and those audiences are going to be attracted to that and go for it.
I think I continue that comment with the Nigerian filmmaking.
Oh, yeah. Now you're gonna get me going. Nollywood. So 1960s, 1950s is really the emergence of these nationalist governments in Africa, about Cuba, Algeria, all right? And one of the things about, for example, the French that didn't happen with the English was they saw the importance of bringing the tools of filmmaking into these areas. Right? So the French would actually provide money for African filmmakers to make film. The problem was they expected that the Africans would make these romanticist films and create narratives that, you know, made primitive perception become, maintained. All right. But then you had people like Usman Senden, and you had Gaston Cabaret and whatnot, came out with these fascinating films, went to Cannes, and people were in awe. How could these Africans tell such beautiful films? And it's amazing. All right, they built the whole canon of film. But remember, a lot of them were financed by the French. They were very smart. Right? Those films didn't find real distribution. European shores, they didn't find markets in the US because they didn't put the money in to propel them. All right? But you have a whole host of them who were really working at transforming and building the narrative, transforming the aesthetic. All right? Now, one of the things that emerged out of those were a style of filmmaking called guerrilla filmmaking. That is, and it's articulated right here in the Caribbean and Latin America, from Cuba, Chile, Argentina, what have you, where we dismantled this whole idea that to make a film you had to have all the big Hollywood stars and whatnot. All right. Really, the exciting thing was that they were saying, let's make films according to our reality. How we were dealing with it, right? And the Cubans have a really interesting thing in that. The problem was, the Nigerians, once the technology came, decided, all right, we're going to copy that model. And we're going to make these cheap films on video. Right? But we're not going to give them any political or any real substantive exploration of society. We watch our communities and we see how they like the cheap American film and the Indian Bollywood stuff. We're going to reproduce that. All right, so you get this Nollywood film now, which you know, all the way to the Caribbean, people are taking this thing, but the production was cheap. That was the thing about it, and it created a peculiar aesthetic of melodrama, and you know, it was basically exploitation from all over again, essentially. Right? So it is only recently that the Bollywood, because they made so much money from this now, is deciding maybe we can change the way we see ourselves and create these films now, and bring in more, you know, professionals to begin to explore the aesthetic. I don't know if it's going to work, but the point is that, you know, we reach a stage where at some point exploitation, you get tired of it. You got to, because you have to get tired of seeing yourself being denigrated time and time again in these stories. You have to get time and time again of seeing the scammer as comic or tragic. All right, and this is all word in these stories. All right, and it is only exceptional films that emerge that give us a sense of our being and a sense of ourselves. See it in spots. A number of filmmakers that are emerging, but it's difficult for distribution. All of those really interesting films that were made in Africa that we talked about, all right, they were not even distributed in Africa. Think about that. Movies made in Africa, although African communities could not be distributed to the very people. Right? So, which is why when you say Nollywood, now Nollywood was the promise that maybe we could take a new technology. Didn't happen. So the question there is now, how is it even going into this new thing? Right? It's come all the way to Barbados, trust me. A few weeks ago, 6 weeks or so, there's a young man, I forget his name, young, he has a site called Hold This World. Right? What's his name? Halik Mal, thank you. See, I know a young person. All right. Really interesting guy. Managed to do in Barbados what a lot of other filmmakers or young creatives could. He makes music video, and the music video has been financed by crypto. All right, because what he's been doing is he's been producing, creating these images, these NFTs. All right, and the financiers are saying this kid is onto something. All right, this is something new. This is done, and he's able to finance his work. All right, images are interesting. I'm not saying that they are, you know, yet showing a maturity of an art that gives you a sense of healing and whatnot. But he's getting there. You have to give them room for growth. All right? And that is one amazing thing, because we're people of African descent always seem to have had issues. It's finding the finance to move their work through the distribution systems. I just hope we can continue, all right, and it's not cut off in any way, and that it doesn't affect the kind of work or the kind of stories that. But this is music video. This is not story, right? There's an interesting thing going on in Bishop because the images, and I'm flipping now, improvise it. Right? So we set up a theme, and I'll make this quick point, and then I'll step off. All right. That's a statue. Sat there for all these years. Right? It was put up by a white plantation elite that had decided they were going to become a figure who really was defending the old slavery tradition, right? And had no real contact about it. But the timing of it is interesting because right across from that space was the place where slaves were being enslaved, were auctioned when they came off, right? The cage, thank you. All right. They had to hold the cage. And the theory, the thinking is that, as which Tom was urging, it means that gotta clean up the act. Can't have this kind of thing going on here, right? You have slaves and whatnot, putting their pressure and so on. But, right? And it has stood there for all these years. When George Floyd, all right, and at every stage, the people at the bottom is the folk that begin to cry out, all right? They make their protest known. It's time for justice to go. So, yes, sir, your government removes us. Power to the people, as they used to say. Interesting thing is, the most fascinating thing for me, right, is the ritual. All right, this is indeed the poet. Put this thing in context. Wonderful, very healing. And it's really talking about how we can create images of ourselves for our people to be inspired by. Beauty. And then go over there now and see what's there. It's empty, right? But the most fascinating thing happened days after. A guy called Ninja Man. Dresses, costume or whatnot. But what he does is fascinating. He comes up now with his own version of an African warrior and begins to strike these poses as if he's talking to the state and saying to the state, if you put something here, it must reflect the aspect of who we are. A warrior tradition is what he was, but he's the only person that has come out and said it, right? Even in the context of across the Freedom Park, right? Which I think is an amazing concept, right? All right. My problem is where are the cultural influencers? I use a social media thing, who can help the narrative of this space. All right. We have to be very careful because yes, tourism is an important industry, but we have to be careful that tourism, for all its benefits, does not begin to determine the soul and the creative expression, because it then becomes more entertainment. The spirit of what goes into creating the image, all right, it could be lost. And the students said it to me in most, in a most amazing way. She said the spirit, for example, that's built into Buster is going to be lost years from now, because suddenly it's not going to be necessary, sir. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you see, he still has the shackles, and we're not going to need shackles. And this is the future that they're thinking about. This is the future now that's built in. That Buster very easily could become another figure for exploitation if we are not careful. I'm not saying it's happening. I'm saying that's what I'm seeing, right? If we don't sort of bring the spirit and this creative economy, all right, we have to determine the balance of where we are going to create what is worth the presentation and the soul of our identities against what other people want. Are willing to explore this one. Sorry.
All right, so your response, Andrew, you touched on, highlighted an important aspect of what Joan was talking about in what she previously said, related to the issue of national development and what kinds of strategies can be put in place. So you mentioned the young man with his use of videos. There is a strategy that is there, but also recognizing that there is the potential for harm, and how do we ensure that the moves that we're making in terms of aesthetic appreciation are actually grounded in a concept of social potential and a concept of Caribbean identity, of Barbadian identity, but not one that is speaking to, as you said, exploitation. And as in terms of connecting that note to Black identity, Derek, you're there?
Yes.
On Zoom, Rodney, my colleague in the Department of History and Philosophy, Rodney Worrell, has a comment to make. So, hello, Rodney.
Hi. Yeah, can you hear me? I'm hearing an echo.
And as in terms of the things that my colleague in the Department of History and Philosophy, Rodney Worrell, as a community.
Hi. Yeah, can you hear me? I'm hearing an echo.
Jerry, I don't know.
You might have to turn down your YouTube.
Hi, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, try speaking now, Robert.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, that's good.
Okay, hi. Good. Good evening, comrades, brothers and sisters. I have been listening to this rich discussion. However, I just felt that as somebody who dabbled in the discipline of history, that the discussion could have centered slightly more on, well, I would say slightly more, but I think one should have emphasized the slavery and colonialism and neo-colonialism in terms of the definition of beauty. Good evening, comrades, brothers and sisters.
We have two things right.
Listening to this rich discussion. However, I just felt that as somebody who dabbled in discipline of history, that the discussion could have centered slightly more on, well, it's slightly more, but I think one should have emphasized the slavery and colonialism and neo-colonialism in terms of the definition of Right, do we still have the echo or the echo is gone? Because I just want to make a small comment. Are
Unfortunately, with the feedback from Rodney, I'm going to see if I can quickly call him so that he can say what he has to. Rodney, is he hearing me? No?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, go ahead, Rodney. We're hearing you.
Great.
With the feedback from Rodney.
Okay. It's good now. Right. I was saying a very rich discussion, but I'm saying that yeah, the listener needed to hear because the system of slavery and colonialism and neocolonialism would have destroyed. Hey, wrong time. Okay, I'll see how that works.
We're talking about the
completely agree.
Thank you, Rodney.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
And thanks for joining us.
Okay, so there was a question from Joy. And sorry about the technological challenges just now. But yes, Joy, I don't know if anybody who wants to respond to Joy's question. The issue is that we're now 4 minutes after 8. The time has disappeared so quickly. So we're supposed to be wrapping up now. So Joy's question is a question about where we go, how we can go forward positively in terms of questions of Black beauty and connecting that with the fact that this is part of the CHyS Global Freedom Festival, how we can use our conceptions of Black beauty, positive conceptions of Black beauty as a way of, propelling us forward as freer people. So,
Could I ask a question? Could I tie the question onto Joy's question?
okay.
And that is to ask, when we answer that, how can we, and I'm using the same maybe thesis that you represent, those who cultivate the coming generations, how do we then how do we facilitate a resilience in those who are coming to the penetration, the other forces that may cause them, have caused us, may cause them to see themselves in all kinds of different various ways that we may not consider positive. How do we build a resilience in those forces?
Yes, sir.
Don't forget Joyce, when is the time on the?
Yes, I know how to maneuver with Joy right now. And she understands me. The basis, sometimes, we have the doctors always fixing something that is there on top, but they're not looking at the real cause of it to give a solution. And what I'm finding is, it is our educational system. And the problem is not so much that we could find something new to put there, but when you are thinking in terms of of educating the younger folk about the things that they were not educated about, that they can grow, who are you having in place to do it, to teach? I have a problem here now with this age barrier thing. When you get a certain age, you're no longer to teach, or you're no longer capable or something. But you will have younger people coming up. Would you believe I went away for a couple of years and came back to Barbados, and I know nobody. Nobody. I didn't even know this gentleman. So these are some of the things that happen that make a break. It causes a break. Sometimes you have to be wondering, what really happened here? Where did I go? What have I done to even assist? So now I'm still saying, the children that we have, but I'm still saying children, but they are young women and young men, because I teach the music students as well. And now to tell them something that they never learned before, they say, Mom, so where this information all come from? We didn't know none of this. We didn't have to experience any of this. If I had known this, I know those children, I'm saying children, these young adults, they have children, and they are starting to teach their children these things like, who am I and why I have this and why I have, they are now starting. So my whole thing is, get to the root of the spring. What is the reason? why we have not decided on introducing the other aspects of us into teaching. You to decide where you're gonna put it, if it's on the history or it's on the culture or whatever. But these are the things, these are the ways I believe that you will have to go. Education or educational information and having passionate people with the knowledge of the things. Because then when you take all, want me to give an example? Look at CHyS. Look at CHyS, okay? There's nothing wrong, I ain't saying anything wrong about the CHyS, but what I'm saying is, when you get 60, in CHyS, you're gone. Who replaces them? Somebody who don't know. And so it will be always the reinvention of a wheel. It's always a reinvention. You ain't going no further. Then you have people who know you have to get them. You can train somebody that, well, yes, in time to come. I ain't saying who gonna have a grandson. But that's the way, you know, remove something when it isn't necessary. We need to put those things in place, and that is why CHyS is in the trouble it is in. It will not listen. Somebody else doing something with that have a lot of money that they could do it. We don't have it in the Caribbean, but we want to do the same thing. It isn't possible when you're teaching art to do certain things, and you tell them that, and that's a problem. So because you don't want to go along with everybody, yeah. I don't like the yeah business. If I don't think it is necessary. So I keep my mouth shut. Shut it, I say nothing. Silence sometimes is the best answer.
Just one question about back to the beauty and stuff like that, because I know back in the 1970s and early 80s were taught that was beautiful and beautiful and everything. But then we see something which is creeping in, now we see colorism creeping in, and it was just I think it was in 2017 you saw where Jamaica, there were posted this people who are actually bleaching the skin. So I mean that's telling me now that it seems as though our young people are not appreciating the blackness as much as we did when we were growing up. And where are we going from here? How do we handle this?
Can't get jobs. So if the light skin girls get in the jobs first, well, I ought to get my skin light so I get a job too.
So you're saying that we've gone take a backward step now, where we're no longer appreciating our blackness now? Is that what is happening?
This is money. Go ahead.
The bleaching thing is of very serious concern. The thing is, the question you have to ask yourself, what images are they consuming? Are they attempting to, right? To the point where you are willing to risk your life, physical. So I think you're right that we are in an economy where people make choices, not always the best. But even to bring it back to Joy's question, we do have to look at not just the curriculum, but the curriculum is content, but how we teach it. How do we bring these values down? Because for me, it's about the denial again of black self. The beauty is that idea that I was talking about earlier. Right? We have to create that sense of critical engagement with images, with art, from an early age. The only thing, and history, because Rodney will tell me tomorrow morning that is a key part of it. But these things are intimidating. Unless, I mean, even now, it's interesting, you're right, I'm not a tertiary institution, but I'm fighting, winning most of it, to transform a curriculum where one is able to see oneself in relation to all the other things that you're seeing, the theories and whatnot that come from the study. But the question is, how is that related to self? And how do we now activate the self to create in our own image and in our own interest? It's not easy, it's strategy, but we have to look at a system. We were accustomed being taught. We're in a world that's changing. We are gaining knowledge through the engagement, a different way of seeing and a different way of thinking. The project, sometimes gives one more value, in direction. More collaborative, peer-to-peer, right? I think those are some of the results of education, and so we're looking at that seriously, at this particular education. Right? This whole thing about 11 plus is very, very important. Right? And I think people are asking the right questions. Right? And it's not simply what are you replacing it with, but what type of education do we conceive a child for the future? That really is the basis of what the change should be about. It's not just simply about, yes, a few kids, not a few kids, a large number of kids are sort of placed in a pecking order. It's about how do we see ourselves and how are we ensuring that the broad mass children get the best of the system that will make them globally competitive. That's where we are.
I've sat here, I've listened. We are very afraid of meeting things head on. I came through the system in the 60s, colonial system school, where we were taught that things white were right. Became independent in 1966. And for some reason, we have a problem of reverting, of changing that whole thing. Because people will say it's reverse racism. I have never seen a beautiful beautiful white woman. As far as I'm concerned, all white women, all white people are ugly as hell. What's wrong with that? In the 1970s, African people in the Caribbean started to wear locks. Everybody got against them. What are you doing this? Because the thing was to have a part in here. I grew up in a household where my grandfather was white. My great aunt was white. I have absolutely no problem in telling white people or talking to white people the way how we should talk. I was ostracized from my family in the 1970s because of my views You have people today in the 90, in 2022 who are afraid to say what should be said. You have an educational system that today is still teaching a lot of damn foolishness to children. You have books in schools. You have media that is still projecting this view that white is beautiful and anything black is ugly. And we skirt around issue all the time talking about black beauty. We should be discussing that. Black is beautiful, always was, always will be. Listen, how many men in here would want a wife with thick lips and a flat nose? They're looking for somebody. Look at Rihanna. Somebody that looked like Rihanna is the most beautiful, but somebody with thick lips and a flat nose and kinky hair, you got it? Oh no, not she. You're fooling yourself. Huh? Talk about the real issue. Language. We just brought out a book of poems. And one of the poems in that book is dealing with language, how language has messed up our psyche. Black. I grew up in, as I said, I grew up in a household in 6 months. That's short rate. And you know when you get a morning, you bathe the face. I went to do so. My great aunt, who was blonde hair, looked at me, Carl, what are you doing? You gonna make your nose flat. Jesus Christ, man, you want the flat all again. Huh? I mean, be realistic. These are the kind of things that I have always, I do not remember a time where I was not proud of who I am as a Black person. Okay? There are a lot of people who grew up in Barbados in the 60s, went to school, and they were not proud of that. But you know, one of the things that really made me come alive as an African person in Barbados, when I attended the Yoruba House in the late 1970s, I met Rashid Foster and Ricky Paris and those guys. Huh?
Ancestors.
Yeah. And you have people nowadays, young girls nowadays, bleaching the skin, and they want to release Indian people here with all these things in the huh? If I were government would ban them sort of thing, you could not buy that guy here in Barbados. Huh? You couldn't buy it, you had to leave Barbados and go and buy it somewhere and get it done. You couldn't buy it here. We don't want Black beauty. I remember the days when African young lady in Barbados, if her hair was short, it's picky hair. Y'all remember that? Picky hair. Now a lot of young, beautiful African girls in Barbados wear their hair short, wear their hair in locks. Huh? But a lot of black men in Barbados, young black men in Barbados don't want no girl in the locks, right? Walking with a lot of old women. Old silly women.
Okay, thank you.
No,
But
are you realistic?
no, I understand the point you're making. And I thank you for your intervention and reflections. But as I said before, time is going, so it has gone, yes. So, Joe, final comments, please?
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting comments you made. And I want to just pick up very quickly about the importance of education and training so that our curricular offering and our delivery of the content will incorporate strategies that will embrace our young people, make them value themselves, understand that they are in fact beautiful, worthwhile, and productive. But I also want us to not to be afraid when the disruptions take place. Because it's through those disruptions that we are able to build what you talk about in terms of resilience. So the disruptions provide us with a space and opportunity to rethink, retool, retrain, and come with new and innovative ways of engaging and interacting within our society. And I want to end with the fact that through this process of introspection, questioning, that we come to a point where we can restore what Andrew spoke about in terms of that connection and harmony between the body, mind, and spirit. And too often we ignore that component, that spirit, because that's it, embedded in that notion of spirit is who we are, our identities, and how we want to portray ourselves locally and globally. Yes. So we need to get that harmony coming together so that we feel a sense of pride and that we show the beauty that we are. And we talk about beauty, but we have to talk about its varieties. Yes, and I think I want to leave with it, that we appreciate and value all the varieties and all the forms that are presented to us.
There is a great African philosopher by the name of CHyS, who sadly died recently. And he spoke and reused some of his terms. He spoke about the idea of there being universals, but also particulars. And when we talk about beauty, yes, we recognize that there may be some universal standards when we're thinking about the beauty of the body, for example, in terms of, whatever we mean by a clean skin, right? But also that there are particulars that are there as well in terms of different types of body shapes and different shades, different skin tones, and it's about reflecting that sense of particulars and that range of particulars. I just want to very quickly respond also to both of your questions. As a representative of the Department of History and Philosophy, so one of the things that the department is working on is getting history back in the primary schools, because history has not been in primary schools in Barbados for some years, and it has had a significant negative impact. And so that is a serious project that's being worked on in the department, working with the Ministry of Education here, and hopefully will come to fruition very shortly. And something that I'm very happy to say that I've been working at, well, a bit with Derek and Cornelia and the Center for Irish Studies on is having conversations about philosophy with children. So last year we did a range of sessions with some children as young as 9 up to 16 years old. And it's very interesting that during one of those sessions, I can't remember the term, like I don't know if you remember the term, Amelia, that was used, or Halo, but it was a term that was used to talk about, it was a very dark-skinned boy who was in the class, in the session. And there was a Bayesian term that was used that I didn't know the term, but it was a derogatory term to refer to the color of his skin. No, it was, I didn't recognize the term. So I had to actually ask Amelia, well, what does this term mean? Do you remember? You don't remember? No. But we then spent the rest of the session actually talking about race and racism and the history of race. And it was really interesting because there were questions that these young people were asking me about things like race within our Caribbean space, questions of colorism, Christianity and the link with some of the conceptions of race that we have. And so we spent the session was supposed to be an hour, it went longer than that because we spent so much time talking about the issue. And I think if we can facilitate more of those kinds of conversations to provide a space for young people to delve into some of those issues and to be able to respond to the insecurities that they themselves are facing and how best to deal with those, and to connect to where we started our conversation in terms of talking about a sense of self, a sense of identity, a development of a positive sense of self. To see that, yes, once it's not a matter of being Black but beautiful, but recognizing, as Carl said, that you're Black, of course you're therefore beautiful. And if we can develop strategies to instill that in more of our young people, so that then whatever choices they make in terms of things like hairstyle, clothes, and so on, that those choices will be informed not by whims, by social media and so on, but by that deep sense of self that they would have developed from a young age. Right? So I just wanted to wrap that up by saying that. So I want to thank you all so much. The time disappeared very quickly. I had a list of other questions that I wanted to talk about. I'm very happy that somebody raised specifically the question of colorism, because that was one of the issues that I wanted to talk about. So thank you all for your insightful comments and responses to the questions posed by me and by the audience members and their comments as well. And thank you very much for being here to be part of the discussion. Thank you.
Before you wrap up, I would like to thank Dr. Berman for agreeing to come back to South Campus here.
So thank you all. I think you all agree that the panel lived up to our high expectations with an extremely engaging, wide-ranging and deep discussion. And that's why it's called Philosophy and Art, these sessions, because we start with the philosophy
and we start with the art as well. So we start with both, and we go all over the world from there. So I want to thank you, Joan, Andrew, Nancy. Thank you all for coming, and with not very long notice, contributing to this. And of course, our gracious host, our philosopher. And I know she has a longer list of questions because I gave her about 12 questions to ask the panel, which she only did about 3. So that's why we're going to be back here next year, the same time, to continue to explore the topic. It did not miss my attention that, by the way, this is a collaboration between the Spikestone Parish Independence Committee, the Spikestone Parish organizing, St. Peter Parish organizing, well, yes, it's part, I give all the Spikestone. The Parish Independence Committee, the Parish Organizing Committee, the Spikestone Task Force, the Center for Hybrid Studies, and these particular sessions, we collaborate with the History and Philosophy Department at UE for the philosophy and art sessions. So it did not miss my attention that we have 3 faculties from the university here. We have social sciences, I believe, yes. We have culture and creative arts and performing arts. And we have humanities and education all in one place. And we have, pardon?
And we have Kayla representing
Science and technology, yes. And we have formerly, I know for sure, UB, BCC, in terms of Nancy, and science and technology, by the way, as well. So we have the only people that we don't have over here is law, and there might be a reason for that. That'd be, and so thank you all. Thank you for coming. I want to make a point that very often these things start with small crowds. Once people find out the type of knowledge, the type of food, the type of water that you're getting at these sessions, we expect them to swell. And in any case, we will extract from the recordings, because we recorded it, to make sure that as many people as possible get some of this information. In wrapping up, I want to thank the representative for the area for never missing a session, except when it's on Friday nights after sundown. I tell the world it's because his wife tells him yes, he will not sundown. But he claims it's because he's an Adventist. So thank you for all your support. The Barbados Library Service has been tremendous in providing this this space, some of the technicals and so on. So they have been doing a lot of work. Today they had a storytelling at Farley Hill. They had a slamming poetry slam a few weeks ago. We're actually using some of the poets from that, and they continue to do tremendous work. So thank you. Barbados Library Services, John Downs. And downstairs, we'll be expanding the exhibition to the space just downstairs, and we want to thank the Republic Bank for providing that space. And yes, all of this was done on Africa Day. Remember, we do this, the entire Spicetown Global Freedom Festival is within the season of emancipation. That is an advantage and a bit of a disadvantage because the season has blown up this year. Everybody knows about the season of emancipation this year now. And so today alone, there were about 250 different events, which is a good thing because there was a time when we had to beg people to hold one event. So we're not complaining. That's why perhaps there aren't that many people here tonight. But it's fine with me if they're supporting Golden Square. There was another online discussion about the African diaspora and so on. So I think that we're making some progress. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to the people who joined us faithfully on Zoom. Thank you all for your participation and input. Thanks to the ambassadors and the attendants and so on that work with the Parish Independence Committee. And with that, I want to say travel safely. Yes, on Friday, come back down to Spikes to the Fisherman's Pub. Come and drink some drinks, eat some food, and listen to some slamming poetry from young people and other talent singing and so on, and the band 822. If you do not know about the band 822, it says something about your age. So before you ask anything, go and find out first. And they are one of the tremendous emerging bands in various young bands. And then we have poets, I believe, Irija, the Dawn, is going to be performing. Malachi, who's from Pakistan, I think, will be performing. The hostess will be Janine, and she'll perform. And it will be a good time. A good time will be held by all. Right. So I will see you on Friday, and I'm letting you know now that this exhibition continues for another 3 weeks. Then we have the next one is African spirituality, Obe and voodoo and all them things, and Orisha work and so on, and the artwork to go along with it. So we have that, and look out for the calendar for the rest of the festival. But I'm letting you know this year that I expect to see you the same time here next year to continue exploring this, and we hope to have people from around the region and globally to visit with us. Thank you very much. Travel safely, and be beautiful.